Hey guys, this is Darren, and I wanted to bring today's devotional thought dealing with grace under fire. I thought about Joseph as his life clearly and perfectly exemplifies what it means to operate and to thrive gracefully while living in fiery conditions. And so I'll be coming from the book of Genesis chapter 39, dealing with the first 3 or 4 verses. We see the story of Joseph here. He's sold by his brothers to the Ishmaelites, and they bring Joseph as a slave to Egypt. Potiphar, who is the captain of the guard, Pharaoh's guard, he buys Joseph as a slave. In verse chapter 2, we see a common refrain that is repeated over and over throughout the story of Joseph as a slave in Egypt. And that common refrain is, "The Lord was with Joseph." It sets the tone for what will take place ultimately. If you've ever read the story, you know that God's ultimate purpose was revealed through Joseph. But today I wanted to just deal with the foundational piece of the story. In verse chapter 2, the Bible says that the Lord was with Joseph and he prospered in the house of Potiphar. Everything Joseph touched became successful. As a result of that, Potiphar saw that there was something different about this slave. He saw that there was something unique about this slave. The Bible said that he saw that the Lord was with Joseph, and as a result, he made Joseph his personal attendant. Now, we don't know if that was always his intention to make Joseph his personal attendant, but we know that as a result of seeing that there was a God thing happening in Joseph. There was something different. He was different from all of the other slaves that he had acquired that day, that he intended to make Joseph his personal attendant. Now, his motivations may have been selfish, but it doesn't matter. This story shows that God is able to use us even though we find ourselves in the least desirable stations of life. Even those people who are enemies of us, God has a way of using them to be a blessing to us, which ultimately means that we will be a blessing to God. And so I believe the lesson for us is very clear. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we are ready to lament and we're ready to leave and get out of Dodge, whether it's our home life, whether it's a relationship, whether it's on the job. Perhaps you're not receiving the kind of fulfillment that you thought you should receive. And God is challenging someone through the life and story of Joseph to perhaps stand still, and as the Bible says, stand still and see God's salvation. Perhaps God is working out a bigger object lesson, a bigger picture, whereby his will ultimately will be done through you right there in the fire. And oftentimes we fail this test where we do not operate gracefully in fiery conditions. We try to get out of there because our natural inclination is to not be in a situation that is least desirable. But we see in the life of Joseph, we don't hear anything about Joseph being combative. We don't hear anything about Joseph trying to escape. I'm sure he had his down nights, and perhaps he cried himself to sleep. I don't know. But all I do know is that he had a certain work ethic that really glorified God, a kind of work ethic that showed that the Lord was with him, to the point that Potiphar recognized that this man had to be promoted. This man had to be exalted because there was something different about him. He was not your run-of-the-mill slave. And so God is challenging someone just as he is challenging me right now to, when I find myself in least desirable stations in life, that perhaps that is the best time to look up to God and to find out what God is up to. Look up to God and find out what his will is, what his purpose is. Because based on the life of Joseph, we see that it is in those conditions where God operates best, when we are way in over our heads and we can't get out on our own. And if we are just faithful to God, the Bible says that if I be lifted up, Jesus says, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. Joseph lifted up Jesus Christ through his work ethic. Joseph lifted up Jesus Christ by being faithful to his job. So much so that Potiphar made him his personal attendant, because every single thing that Joseph touched was successful, not because he was skillful, not because he was the man for the job, but because he honored God. And we see God working through Joseph to bring about a greater end, a greater purpose. But it started with him being faithful and showing an incredible amount of grace in the fire, being a slave in Egypt in Potiphar's house. So I just wanted to encourage someone today that your lot may not be the most desirable lot right now. This is not where you thought you would have been at this stage in your life. But God is a faithful God. He knows where you are, and he has a purpose that he's trying to work out through you right where you are. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have plans to remove you, but right now he wants you to be faithful and to show grace under fire. God bless you today, and I'll see you at the next installment of Grace Under Fire. Have a great day.